So it's about having, I guess, knowledge of the ways that becoming parents is likely to impact on our relationship, not taking those changes and challenges personally, being aware of the way we react under stress and the ripple effects of those reactions. So, it's complex. There is no one easy answer. It's a combination of a number of things that have a ripple effect. So it's more complicated. It's more complex than most people realise.
I would probably say to any father that it's difficult to acknowledge that you're struggling. At the same time, it's very normal to be a father who's struggling. I think it comes as part of the package. If you're a father, you're going to struggle, and for most fathers, it's hard to talk to someone about it. I would say that if you're struggling and you're a father, that it's not a sign of weakness or failure as a parent. That's usually just part of it, and there could be a lot of benefit in talking to someone.
Some of the thoughts that these men experience, some don't want to come back home to a screaming, crying baby, or having to deal with anything related to the baby and the partner, because they're not included to begin with. And so they feel like are they part of this, family now? They go from 2 to 3 for first time fathers. It's a big jump. And, all of a sudden it's this little person that is dictating your life now. And when it's, it was just you and your partner. And now you have a little one who's waking you up and, really telling, in a way, dictating what you do. So it's a very big change for fathers.
The mothers become totally focused on their baby because that's the way the hormones and their brains drive them. And all of a sudden, the fathers are not the center of their partner's life. And it's I see a lot of jealous guys at around 6 weeks who have been totally sidelined. I feel like I'm an ATM. That's all, that sort of attitude. But this is something you're just going to have to just deal with it, because that engrossment is all part of the body's way of dealing with the relentlessness of the fatigue and the effort needed to bring up a baby. These highly dependent little things who seem to be totally helpless, and you have absolutely no training, and you've been given this person who looks like, if you don't stay awake, that they'll fall off a twig. So it's really hard to adjust to this, and dads just need to hang in there.
I guess the most difficult thing about the whole process was how much it affected my relationship with my wife, and how abandoned I felt by her, because all of a sudden her entire focus and attention and all of her love was directed at Alaska, and I was just left to be the guy that drove around collecting milk and making breakfast and all that, just really mundane stuff. And I felt very, very lonely in that. That was probably the most challenging thing, because it wasn't just that our lifestyle had changed and I now had this responsibility and all of that. It was that I didn't feel supported by the person that I relied on the most. So I felt like I'd been hit by a couple of different things. And again, that's something that no one prepares you for. I mean, it's certainly, popular media doesn't portray that aspect of things at all. And so I might have heard stories about it affecting people's relationships and stuff, but there's still this naive romantic side of myself that doesn't believe that that'll happen to me. But it very much happened to me, that I felt so abandoned, and then that spirals into a bunch of different things of like, I feel weak now for needing that support from her. I feel weak as a man. I feel like it triggered so much of my own childhood stuff, and I felt so much like a child in this time when I'm supposed to be becoming a father, and I feel like I'm regressing more into a childhood state. And there's so much more like childhood wounds coming up for me, and then also feeling, you know, being around my parents at the time, feeling like they really didn't understand me, and realizing how much I felt abandoned by them my whole life.
And for those fathers whose partner experience these adverse events, for example, if they have a cesarean, an emergency Caesar, they need to attend to a lot of the household domestic chores. So along with attending to the baby, they're attending to the domestic chores. And that could be quite challenging for a father who hasn't engaged in that previously. Even if a father has, you're used to working in partnership with your partner, and all of a sudden now you have a partner to care for, and you've been through an experience where you thought maybe your partner, you know, is your partner alive or not? And that could be a very daunting experience.
How frightening and traumatic the birth itself was, I had no idea. How much of a grind and how difficult it is to even feel connected to the baby is, I had no idea. You know, like I felt like I was, you know, gonna wake up after the baby was born and have a renewed sense of purpose in my life and all of that. But I woke up feeling just the same, and that felt very hollow. You know, that I was like, oh, I'm the same person. I still have the same desires. I still have the same, you know, nothing's really changed except that there's this baby now that I'm responsible for, and I don't feel an overwhelming sense of love for it. I feel confused and all of that stuff. And so realizing that was quite a shock.
Postnatal depression, that's just really the term that we give to an experience of depression that comes after the birth. If it comes before the birth, then we call it antenatal depression. It's the main things, the main two symptoms that we look out for when we talk about depression, feeling sad or depressed most of the time. And the second one is that we're losing pleasure or interest in activities that we'd usually find pleasurable or interesting. Certainly loss of confidence, or not feeling confident about being a parent, or having a strong sense of guilt about parenting, feeling like you're a failure as a parent. Having low motivation or not being able to activate yourself. Changes in your sleep pattern that aren't explained by the baby's sleep patterns. And in very severe cases of depression, people might have thoughts of harming themselves or suicide.
So some of the risk factors might be lifestyle changes, a lack of sleep. Clearly, that's something that can be an awful experience. Unmet expectations, like we've already mentioned, of life and of fatherhood. You expected it to be this way, and then it's actually not. So you get disappointed, and then you know that disappointment can spiral. Preparation for these kind of things ahead to work out how you're going to manage those challenges might be an idea, just to think about a few things. The changing role of fathers. You know, back in the day, dads were just the disciplinarian, they were the provider, and they didn't really provide much emotional support or guidance or that kind of thing. And now, the changing role of dads has meant that we're included in so much more, which means the benefits are good, but then there's a lot more responsibility and pressure and that kind of thing on the modern dad. There's a lack of social and emotional support for fathers as well around this time, because 20% feel more isolated, and if you're under 35, that goes up to 40%. So how are you going to?
Jeepers, yeah.
How are you going? Have you got some close friends who are also dads, or?
Yeah, I do. My best mate's just had a baby.
That's so good.
Yep.
That's so good because you'll be able to, you know.
Yeah, and my other best mate's just told me the other week he's having his wife's.
That's fantastic.
Having a baby too. So, yeah.
You're really
I'm
fortunate.
really excited.
Yeah, you've got to leverage that support as
Yeah,
well from those
yeah.
guys, and you'll have good access to information from other men about what you're going through at that time. That's a really positive thing to hear. Another one that comes up for people is unresolved childhood issues. So if people have had a poor upbringing themselves, you know, if they haven't had a good, strong father figure, or I should say just a father figure, then, you know, that might come up for them when they first become a dad. Infant fussiness. Children exist on a bell curve, and at one end you have the one who settles easily, no problem, is always fine with everything you do, never really cries at all. And as you go up the bell curve, they kind of need a little bit more kind of attention, and they're more attention seeking. And at the other end of that, you've got babies that you actually can't put down. They always need to be attached. They always need to be attached to you, and that can be really, really
that could be a challenge.
Demanding.
Yeah.
Right? So, but they're at the smaller number at the end of the scale of the bell curve. But it's worth preparing yourself for that possibility. The Gottman Institute, they report that very high levels of increased conflict. That doesn't mean that conflict has to be, always negative. It's just something that you might want to prepare for.
Yeah.
Fair
enough.
Maybe set some rules of engagement, or allow each other timeouts, or if things get a bit heated, time out, but then talk about it later. Think of some strategies of how you're going to manage conflict in those early days, because it can be quite stressful and it can be quite harmful. I think this is really important to learn to have conflict in a safe bubble. Yeah, essentially it means kind of not crossing any lines.
Yeah, okay.
So kind of, think of your relationship as a vessel, and that if you put pressure on it, that it might, crack at the seams. So you've got to actually have conflict within there that's respectful, and that doesn't cross any lines, that actually you're able to say all you need to say, but not get too offended or too triggered by circumstances. Yeah,
definitely.
And the way you can do that is using soft language rather than harsh language.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, always coming from your own perspective.
So what would be harsh language as opposed to that, if that's soft language?
You are harming.
Okay, so it's like accusing.
Yeah, so if you start with an accusation, it's really hard to bring it back from there. So if you start with a soft kind of introduction, I feel that this is impacting me in this way. No one can tell you what your own feelings are.
Yeah.
So if you come from that perspective, it's less harmful.
The best arrangement is where you trust each other and you back each other up. So it's more than just getting on with each other. It's more than tolerating each other. In the parenting game, the best results for the baby and the child happen when you work as a team who support each other.
With the self-care, it's, I guess, being realistic and having realistic expectations about what's to come. Knowing that the sleep deprivation, the steep learning curves, the hormonal shifts are likely to have an impact. You're going to be tired, you're going to be exhausted, you're going to be distracted. All that energy, time and attention and focus is likely to be going to your baby, especially in the first few weeks. But at some point, you need to be able to pay some attention to yourself and pay some attention to your partner as well. So self-care is things like, eating well, eating nutritious meals fuels our energy levels. Exercise is a natural anti-anxiety, antidepressant. So family-friendly exercise is really important. So, playing whole days of golf or going surfing for 3 hours where you can't be contactable is not family-friendly exercise. So think about what you can do, maybe in a shorter duration closer to home, so that you can still get your exercise in, because it's really important for your mental and physical health, but also be available in case, you need it at home in fairly short notice. Having regular stress relief. So stress is really, really important. We know that stress is a trigger for both anxiety and depression, for both mothers and fathers. So doing what you can to reduce your stress levels is really important, and as early as possible. Just to give you an example, so many couples upsize when they're expecting a baby. They think that renovating or buying a bigger home or buying a bigger car is preparing for parenthood. It's not. It's just taking on financial debt, which is then going to mean that you've got competing priorities after the baby comes. You can't be at home enjoying your baby as much as possible and earning the money to pay for the debt that you've just encumbered at the same time. So I actually tell parents, don't upsize. You can upsize when the baby's 1 or 2 or 3. They don't care. They don't know. Babies are this big, and they want to be as close to you as possible for the first couple of months. They want to be, like on your chest or next to you in bed or something like that. You don't need to upsize. Don't put that pressure on yourself. So being aware of what the stresses are and anticipating what the stresses might be and creating some realistic expectations based on what we know the stresses are is great for self-care.
Really looking at opportunities to build what you have, build your capacity to become parents. So that's building on sitting down separately and identifying what gives me strength, what makes me feel supported. How can I make sure I have ongoing access to that, both as an individual and as a couple? How do we recharge? How do we reunite as a couple? Because once the baby comes along, all the focus is on the baby, and it's very important that we retain that focus on ourselves as a couple, because that's where it all started.
Self-care has a few components. Again, this is from the Gottman Institute, and they recognise that physical, intellectual, social, spiritual and emotional self-care is really important around the time of becoming a dad. So you think of the way you can maintain your physical fitness, intellectual stimulation, keep up your social life, which you've got those other dads to hang out with. Spiritual, in any sense, what do you do as a routine that kind of reflects some kind of practice that keeps you spiritually aware. Emotional self-care is about being aware of your feelings and emotions, and then trying to monitor them and to do something about that through compassion, self-compassion, to look after yourself. There's a couple of resources that are really handy in this regard, and that's one of them is Ready to Cope, and that's by the Centre of Perinatal Excellence. They send you an email every couple of weeks, and it's on, it's actually about the time of pregnancy that you're actually experiencing. Then it follows in on after birth, and they give you all this advice via email. Really positive. It's called Ready to Cope.
All right.
Yeah, and SMS for Dads is another kind of resource tool like that, and they text you. They text you every, 3 or 4 days, and they just say, from the baby's perspective sometimes, and they say, hey Dad, I'm feeling like, I'm growing my hearing. I've just been able to starting to hear you, that kind of stuff. And then you know what's going on for the baby, because it's actually calibrated to the progression of the pregnancy.
As a parent and as a father, you're going to have struggles and challenges. And to know that if you have struggles and challenges, you're not alone, that there are other fathers out there who are also struggling with different things and learning and growing through the process of being a father. A conversation I'm often having with fathers is about looking after themselves. Typically, it's a stereotype of men, the Aussie men, that we can look after ourselves and we can do it all ourselves and we don't need anyone's help. And that's something that is reflected in, I probably relate to that myself and in the fathers that I talk to. So working with fathers to work out what their needs are, how they need to look after themselves, being prepared to negotiate with their partner or those around them to get what they need, and also asking for support where they need to.
Going a bit easy on themselves, understanding that this is life-changing, but you don't have to be world's best dad. You just have to be a good enough dad, because every child loves their parent.